By the mid-90s, when PowerPC Macintosh computers started to launch, Apple had an incomprehensible number of models. And when PowerPC Mac started shipping, it only got worse. By 1996, when this Power Macintosh 7600 came out, there were at least 8 different lines of desktop Macs, not to mention PowerBooks. And so it was kind of a mess. Apple had a bunch of motherboard designs, CPU designs, and case designs, and it just kind of mashed them together. Now, that did make these Macs very flexible. And to prove that point, we're going to run 6 different processors in this computer, and we're going to take a look at the evolution of the PowerPC from its lowly start as a 601 100 megahertz and go up through just about the fastest that these PCI Power Macs can run, a G3 at 400 megahertz. We're going to run some games on them, see how it handles those. And we're also going to take a look at some productivity benchmarks and see how much faster processors got over time. Because I'll tell you up front, in the 4 years from 1995, when the Power Mac 7500 came out with this same motherboard, to 1999's blue and white Mac, there was an enormous difference in performance. That was happening on the PC side too. Intel and AMD were locking horns and racing for megahertz. The AIM Alliance, which is Apple, IBM, and Motorola, took a different route. It's really fun to look at. So we're going to take a look at these computers today. I'm Ben, and you're watching This Old Mac. Welcome to This Old Mac. This is hopefully going to be the first in a semi-regular series of videos that look at old Macintosh computers. I had originally thought I would go through my collection of old Macs in chronological order by release, but I'm not really ready to look at my Macintosh SE just yet. Got something pretty special for that. So today I thought I'd take a stab at this format with the Power Macintosh 7600. Apple released this machine in February of 1996 with a 120 megahertz 604 processor. It was eventually discontinued in late 97 when the first Power Mac G3 was announced, and by that point it had been upgraded to a 200 megahertz 604E. So this machine is special. It's running its operating system off of a BlueSCSI, which is a emulation device that converts a regular micro SD card to the 10 megabytes per second fast SCSI bus found in this Mac. We've kind of got solid state storage through the SD card. And it's also upgraded slightly with a Farallon 10100 Ethernet card, which we're really not going to test here at all, and an ATI Rage 128. I did not want the built-in Mach 64 graphics to really get in the way of the processor, so we did upgrade the video card. It's one of the faster PCI options that are available. There are 3 Radeons that would be faster, but I don't have any of those on hand. That'd be the original PCI, the 7000 PCI, and the 9200 PCI. Since I don't have any of those, the Rage 128 will have to do. This is a card that came out of a blue and white G3, which is another machine that we'll talk about later on. Before we get too far into it, let's take a look at the processors. First up, we've got a PowerPC 601, 100 megahertz. All of these processors are going to run on a bus somewhere between 45 and 50 megahertz. This one runs at a 50 megahertz bus. Then we have the original stock processor. This is a PowerPC 604. Runs at 132 megahertz. It runs on like a 47 megahertz bus. The bus is configured by the CPU card. This is a 180 megahertz PowerPC 604E that never shipped in this system. And this is a 225 megahertz 604E that also never shipped in this system. They came from other mini tower Macs or clones or one of literally dozens of different configurations. And then we've also got this. This is a Sonnet Crescendo G3 250 megahertz that has 512K of L2 cache. And then inside the system, you can see this is a PowerPC G3 running at 400 megahertz. So there's a lot to check out. Like I said, we're going to run some processor specific benchmarks like MacBench, and then we're going to run a handful of games that kind of go from, the mid 90s up to about 2000, and see how this system handles it on these different processors. So if you're excited, I'm excited. Let's dig in. All right, first we're going to start with MacBench. This is a pretty synthetic benchmark that does some CPU and FPU tests, but it also has some real world stuff, specifically the publishing graphics test and even the regular graphics test go through some things that are pretty real life, like Photoshop and Excel. And I think it's worthwhile to look at because it's a contemporary benchmark. It's something that you would have run when the G3 400 was new. All right, so most of this is probably what you'd expect. The G3 400 is obviously the fastest. The 601 100 is obviously the slowest. But what blows me away is how big the gulf is between the two. A G3 running at 400 megahertz is 7 times as fast as a PowerPC 601 100. Some of that is the CPU architecture, because man, there's a big jump from 604E at 225, basically doubled to get to the G3 250. It's only a 25 megahertz difference. But if we start to compare some of the system infos, let's do the 250 versus the 225. You'll see that the cache speed for the 225, that runs at a 45 megahertz bus. That's all the faster the cache runs. For the 250, which runs on almost a 47 megahertz bus, kind of a weird divider, the cache speed is half the speed of the processor, or 3 times as fast as the cache on the motherboard. And it's also much bigger. So the 250 has a 512K cache, L2 cache. And if we go to the 400, we've got a megabyte of L2 cache. So the cache probably has a lot to do with the differences. All right, so let's close that. So yeah, from our base system at 132 megahertz, the G3 400 is 5 times as fast, and the 250 is almost 3 times as fast. So it's a huge jump. And when we get to the floating point, the 604s were actually really beefy. So the floating point differences are basically clock speed. The 250 G3 is just a little bit faster. That's a little less surprising because the 604s are the big beefy units. It's a shame there are no 603E cards because I'd love to make that comparison. And then here we get down to the disk test. You can see it's not a huge difference, but there's a difference between the different processors. Once we get to any G3, it's basically maxed out. And the same goes for graphics. There's actually a pretty big difference. We're using that same Rage 128 graphics card in all of these. So the fact that it's like 3 times as fast, almost 3 times as fast, from the slowest to the fastest is kind of impressive. That just means that a lot of the acceleration, even on these accelerated graphics cards, is still being pushed off onto the CPU. The CPU's got to keep it fed. And honestly, what you probably want is just a faster Mac. These upgrades get kind of expensive. And so, using them, buying one of these for a slower Mac probably doesn't make a lot of sense. This accelerator, people on eBay want like $300 for the 400 megahertz accelerator. It's kind of stupid. You're better off just buying a blue and white G3 if that's what you want. Okay, it's time to start our game tests on the PowerPC 601. We're going to run 5 games across all of our processors. It's going to be kind of gut feeling for some of it, but we're going to start with Doom, and then Duke Nukem 3D, and then GL Quake, then Quake 2, and then Unreal Tournament. Now, I can pull the plug on any of these if I feel like a processor is not going to run them well. So I may end up skipping Unreal Tournament if GL Quake and Quake 2 don't go well on the 601. So we start with Doom 1, which is, of course, a 256 color game. Well, Doom 1 on high settings is super laggy. Let's do low detail. Is a lot better, but still not overly smooth. Move on to Duke Nukem 3D. Intro video is slow. That doesn't give a ton of confidence. Let's see how it actually plays. Okay, we are in high detail again, and it is sluggish to start. Now remember, this processor never ran in a Power Mac 7600. It came with the predecessor, the 7500, which had the same motherboard, but obviously the 601 instead of the 603. And that's fairly rough. All right, so if we go to graphics and go down to medium, that is much smoother. That is definitely playable. GL Quake is the first game that will use our Rage 128's 3D accelerator. It's not the greatest 3D accelerator, but it's better than software rendering. I have already tested this for myself, and you can get higher frame rates at the same resolution with better image quality by going with OpenGL instead of software rendering. Now this game has a built-in benchmark, so we're going to do the time demo, and then we're going to do a little bit of gameplay on each CPU. Look at that slowdown when you get a lot of geometry. 17.2 FPS. See what that looks like in a new game. Oh, yikes. Look at that. See if we can make it better. We can lower the screen size. That makes it a little more tolerable. When you're in a corner, it's not bad, but boy, once you get into a game, also the load times are not very good. I think we might actually stop here on the 601. You know, Quake came out for the Mac later, so this isn't even really the target that it was built for. So here we are on the PowerPC 604, 132 megahertz. In MacBench, it was more than a 32% performance increase. It was more like 50%. So let's start a new game. Hey, this is a big improvement. Still not super, but it's better. I go for low detail. It's very smooth, and I would call this completely playable. Not a very optimized version of the game. This is pretty good. A little blocky, a little choppy rather. But not too shabby. If we do medium detail, is very smooth too. Here's Quake on the 604. All right, we went from 17 frames per second to 26, almost 27. That's a pretty big jump. All right, it's still pretty, well, kind of laggy. Looking around the room here. Again, low res software rendering. It's ugly, but it probably run a little bit better. Yeah, this is kind of playable. .604Es are really gonna cement that for us, I think. Let it play through this demo and look at speed. Quake 2 is probably not 604 ready. Now, the README for the game says that it recommends a 603E at 180 megahertz or better to play Quake 2. So 603E versus the regular 604, probably a little bit better clock for clock on the 604, but we're way lower clock speed. All right, so 12.8 frames per second. This is going to be basically intolerable, I think. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is brutal and super laggy, too. Like, I can't play this. All right, we have moved on to the, well, it says 185 megahertz, but to the PowerPC 604E. Load times are way better. And that alone is nice. Yeah, it's definitely hit the realm of playable. I might still go with medium detail. Look at that. That's smoother still. All right, so it's not perfect yet, but we're getting there. Are we on high detail? We are. This runs better than Doom. This is a pretty decent port of this game, all things considered. Very smooth. I dig it. All right, GL Quake on the 604E. See how 3D acceleration is doing with 180 megahertz. And it's running faster than real time, but I think real time works out to be either like right around 20 frames a second, I think. So the fact this is running so well is very encouraging. Oh yeah, 38 frames per second. That's great. Well, it's not great, but it's pretty decent. So this is finally playable without reservation. Like, there's a big difference. We do go from 27 to 39, 27 to 38, something like that. Huge difference. .17 frames per second. Not super playable, but not the worst thing on earth. Okay, I take it back. This is still not quite playable. We're going to call it borderline off the bat. Who is shooting me in the back? All right, let's go into Unreal Tournament for the first time. I think this is going to be brutal. Okay, sitting still, we're sub 20. I can't see what I'm doing. And the frame rate is in the single digits. Brutal. Okay, here's our fastest PowerPC 604E, which according to the Apple System Profiler is running at 225 megahertz. That's about what I was hoping for. So there's like no architectural changes for the first time. We're just looking at pure CPU scaling. Guys, we might still have to look at a G3 to see if Doom can be smooth. Duke Nukem 3D has been running better than Doom, even on the highest settings. Now the 604E did go up to 350 megahertz, but I don't have anything faster than the 225. We're gonna end up calling it here with that, but this is fine. If you do have a G3, it's going to run great. Duke Nukem 3D is going to run even better on a G3, but I think we're at a spot where it's 100% fine. The highest details at 640 by 480 on the 604E. Yeah, so we've added 25% clock speed, going from 180 to 225. And we've added about 25% frame, or a little bit less than 25% frame rate. Went from, what, 36 up to 41, something like that. Not bad. All right, now we're in Quake 2 on the 604E 225. See if we get something approaching playable frame rates. We're running faster than real time, so I'm gonna guess it's not terrible. All right, we're at 19 frames a second, so we're getting closer. So if we start a game, I'll take a look at it in motion. All right, it was immediately gross on the 604, and it was better on the 604E 180, but I would say no. We're probably still not really super playable. It's a little laggy. Phew. Where is everybody? I hear him. Aha. Hey, I killed somebody. This is terrible. All right. So you can see here, the average has been under 14. This is not good. And of course, when we go to use one of the G3 upgrades, we have to install some software. Now that software is already installed. The Sonnet Crescendo extension, but I had disabled it because it really slows down boot times when you're not using a G3 processor. So we've got it enabled, and we'll restart. And of course, once you enable that software or install it for the first time, you'll see evidence. So it gets stuck right about here for a second while it initializes the CPU, and then this banner is going to appear. There it is. And that's how you know our G3 card is completely enabled. You can run the card without this software, but it will not enable the L2 cache. That's one of the biggest boosts that the G3 has over the 600 series, is that backside cache that runs at half the CPU speed. Any G3 is going to be more than enough for these games. Yeah, high detail. All right. Yeah. As smooth as Doom will ever be on a Mac. Now it's time for Duke Nukem 3D on the first G3. And look at that. Super duper smooth. Like, we're gonna double check that this is actually the, yeah, high detail. Oh, and go full screen. That's still looking great. This is going by very fast. I think we're also at a spot where any G3 is gonna do Quake without issue. Load times are a lot faster, 55 FPS. That is pretty darn good. And so just the change in architecture about improved the frame rate by quite a bit. What were you at, 37 before? Now 55? This is no problem. All right, 29 FPS, 29.5. Then once we get going in the game, we're looking good too. By the way, I apologize for this style of capture. These machines like to pick refresh rates that are too high, even for my RetroTink 4K. I'm just lucky to get it running on an LCD sometimes. And I definitely think this game needed a G3. Because now we're getting frame rates in the 20s pretty solid. And it's like, this is as fast as the Dreamcast port or the PS2 port. That was the first time I saw it really dip below 20. Almost playable. And I think when we get to the 400 megahertz, it'll be very playable. All right, we're skipping Duke Nukem and Doom because even at 250 megahertz, it was plenty fast. But we can see here that we are at 400 megahertz with the little accelerator now. So we were at 55 frames per second before. And it's flying through this. "54 frames per second. It's the same. I think we have hit the limit on something. We must just be at the limit of our Rage 128. This doesn't feel like it's much faster either. It might be limited by our Rage 128 again. $34.9. So about 15% faster. The 400 did not make much difference. So we double the cache and increase the frame rate, or increase the clock speed to 400. Okay. This is great, relatively speaking. Frame rate seems to settle in into the low 30s and has some mild dips into the low 20s or very upper teens. You really need a 400 megahertz G3 to play this game. All right, so that about wraps it up for this old Mac. We've looked at the PowerPC processor history. I'm telling you, man, it's wild to see that Apple didn't just quadruple the speed of the Mac in 4 years. It more like, I don't know what the right prefix is. It's 7 times faster on average. You can see that in the processor benchmarks and MacBench. You didn't really see that in games, and that's because other things I think are slowing this down. You're going to want to tune in next time because the next video we do is going to be the battle of 400 megahertz, where I've got a bunch of Macs that can all run G3s at 400 megahertz plus an AGP Power Mac G4 that runs at 400 megahertz, and we're going to compare them and see if it's worth upgrading a machine or if it's maybe worth instead just buying a faster Mac. I think the results are going to be interesting. We'll also take a look at some pricing on that. At any rate, for now, I've been Ben. You've been watching This Old Mac, and I appreciate you sticking around. Take care.